An echo has been introduced.
Oh, that's me playing live stream.
Okay. Oh my God. All right, let's see some familiar faces.
Oh, it's cooking up now.
Sid.
We're just going to let Tim play for a bit while we keep admitting people into the room and let everyone have a chance to join. Wow, people are still coming in. Jeez. All right. Wow. Okay, wow. Right, we're nearly at 100 people here on Zoom. We're 120 on YouTube. Jeez, okay. Amazing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special event, live stream, that Tim and I are doing. I think the news has been busted about why we're here. Because, well, actually, before why the news has been busted, let me just introduce Tim, my history with Tim, because I have to, for gratitude, I have to tell you all about my history with Tim. So, my name's Luke. I run a company called Guitar Vivo. I run that company now. I didn't run that company a couple of years ago when I reached out to Tim. I just left another job, been dishonorably discharged, and came at a terrible time. Had no idea what I was going to do with my life. Just bought a house with my partner, we're trying for a baby, and then all of a sudden I had nothing. But I had this one idea. I had this one kernel of an idea of this book that I thought might be helpful to people if the right person did it. And there was only one person that came to mind. And that idea was this idea for a chord dictionary I had. I had this outline for it, which I'm sure a lot of you, because I emailed everyone who bought it, I'm sure a lot of you have this. Well, there we go. So I was this nobody who'd just been let go from a job. And on my resume, there was nothing, because at that job, you know, all my jobs. I'd done some work for high profile people, but my name doesn't go anywhere. I reached out to Tim and I said, I've got this idea and I'm a nobody. You have no reason to trust me on this, but I believe in this idea. And I think if we did it together, we could do something good with it. If I did it alone, I was thinking of just making like a free pamphlet. If it was something I did alone, it would have been this thick and it would have been given out for free. And luckily, Tim had a look at the idea and elevated it. And we came up with our first book and what was my company's first book, the book that allowed me to approach other artists as someone who'd had success, all thanks to Tim, the book that put me and my company on the map, that has allowed me to not be evicted from my house and for me and my partner to have a baby. All of this stuff comes down to the fact that Tim took a chance on someone annoying him on the internet because I had this idea. And the idea was the Melodic Jazz Guitar Chord Dictionary. And that came out about 1.5 years ago. And obviously the second bit of gratitude I have to do is to everyone who's picked up a copy, because I think the biggest thing that came up while we were developing the book was, are there going to be enough people who love jazz guitar and who love the way that Tim teaches and plays? And that was like a doubt. But we realized you are here. Thank you all for being here. And thank you all for supporting us and getting that first book. And yes, okay, enough of me being cheesy. But what we're here today to talk about is the much anticipated second follow-up book, which, Tim, I'll let you hold up. So if you say something, you'll come on screen and then you can hold up the book.
It's so beautiful and blue. One of the very first comments we got on Amazon after the first book came out was actually someone who was disappointed, but it turned on a light. And they said, well, I thought this was going to be a book of melodic chordal phrases. And unfortunately, they didn't read the description very carefully, but their idea, their sort of mistaken idea, made it very clear that to Luke and I that this book needed to appear as quickly as we could make it. And we took a while to make it because it's hard work to make a book, but we got it right. And I think that it fulfills that person's idea, which is a kind of compendium, not really a lick book per se, but a compendium of phrases that are melodic and harmonic simultaneously, the way a piano player might play. Some people call it chord melody. I don't like that word, but it's the idea that if you play a 2-5-1 in the key of B flat, well, there's a little melody there, ba boo dee doo da, but there's also boom bee boom boom. It's all kinds of melody in that harmony, right? So I just wrote a book about how to embrace that and realize you're always playing melody, even when you think you're just playing chords, and then show some examples of how I might treat various chord progressions. So it's a book full of dots and numbers, but every single passage started with a video. And so as the student, we have this library of videos, all of which have it transcribed in notation and tab and some brief instruction. So it's kind of, it's a book I always wanted to make. Luke has a headache about this, but for me, it would have been about that thick instead of that 120 pages. It probably would have been about 450 pages, but maybe that just has to be volume 2. Anyway, welcome everybody. Thank you.
There's some great comments here that I've just got to address quickly. First, someone said some nice things about the first book. Thank you so much. Someone said, when's this book available? This book is available now. So that's the funny thing that happened, right? Amazon can't launch a product with an exact date. They kind of can, but it's quirky software. So we have to put it on Amazon kind of secretly and then announce it now. But it went live on Amazon a couple of days ago and people found it early. So the surprise got spoiled, and it already went to number one. So congratulations, Tim, on your second number one book.
Thank you.
So yeah, the book is available now. If you go to guitarvivo.com, you'll see there's a link for paperback and a link for PDF. I'll get the sales stuff out of the way first, so you can get it paperback through Amazon or PDF. We've put a launch offer on, so all the prices are lowered. The PDF is like $15, the paperback's like 17 or something. So we're just gonna keep that for the week. But also, I've dropped the PDF price of Tim's first book on the website. So if anyone wants that first book, that's also down to $15.
Twofer. It's a twofer.
Yeah. So you can get them both at a lowered price. The next question, Tim, you're not going to like this. Someone's asked, is this going to be, well, are there plans for a trilogy?
A trilogy, sure, of course.
I think there's plans for a quadrilogy. There's and a
I told-
prequel and sequel.
Yeah. Well, this is a little behind the scenes. Luke told you about how he was a nobody who contacted this other sort of accidental YouTube nobody. We conspired. And at first, by the way, I said no, thank you, because I didn't want to make a chord dictionary. And then he asked a very important question. He said, if you were to make a chord dictionary, how would you make it so that you thought it was good and valuable? And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, oh, let's make one where it's organized by the melody note. And that was the new mousetrap that I think has been helpful. I would love to hear people who actually use it and find that to be a helpful aspect. But at first I said no, and then I thought about it, and I thought, oh, well, let's make it so that the melody note is the organization is the melody note. Then I said one more thing: you have to let me make 5 books. If you want me to make this first one, you have to let me make at least 5. So this is number 2, and yesterday when we sort of signed off on this one being finished, the first question I asked is, okay, what's the next book? So it's I resisted writing books for the longest time, and I guess now I'm doing them.
Yeah, actually, and your next book sounds exciting too. One other thing is, people have messaged me because I sent out this email to everyone who bought the first book. Someone said something like they don't use the book that much because they don't want to wear it out, because like they have to swap around pages, so they use it sparingly. Guys, if you've bought a physical copy of the book and you wear it out, send me a message with a photo of it, and I'll send you a PDF for free. So if you bought that first book,
just get the PDF.
Yeah.
In addition to the paperback, and then you can, because the PDF has some charms. You can make it really big. So if you're blind like me, you can make it as big on the computer, and also it's easily searchable, and you don't wear the pages out.
Right. Let's get into what we're here to talk about today. So
Yes.
I'll actually start this off with the first question we got when I announced the Melodic Harmony Masterclass. Someone said, I don't understand. Those are 2 separate things. They're not in the same world. So I gave my answer, but I'd love to know how you'd answer that question. Hey, I thought melody and harmony were 2 separate things.
Yeah. Your left hand and your right hand, if you don't look closely, look like 2 separate things. But if you trace them back to the center, you realize they're aspects of a larger thing. So that's my idea about it. But I'll tell a little story. This is a kind of a hinted at in the introduction of the book as well. When we were teenage guitar players, at least in my era, and as I look around, I see there's plenty of people from my era in this. If you were at a party and when you were in 10th grade or high school or something, and somebody found out you played guitar, they would always ask you one question almost immediately, which was, "Oh, do you play rhythm or lead?" Anybody been asked that question before? Yeah, right. There's even a famous guitar that has a switch up here that says rhythm, and they don't say lead, that says rhythm and treble, right? To switch from one pickup to the other, which I think is hilarious and somewhat ludicrous, but it's still there if you buy a brand new Les Paul guitar. So more so in the guitar world, which is primarily self-taught, not academic, particularly in those days, it wasn't academic at all. And unlike oboe or piano or harp or something like that, where you learn a pedagogy that's, centuries old, guitar players were always just making stuff up. And if you knew something and the guy down the street knew something, you get together and pretty soon both of you knew two somethings. And it was like that. But this idea of rhythm and lead, I think, is particular to guitar players. And I think it kind of breaks our consciousness a little bit, and we need to get over it. It's true that in 1969, if you were in a garage band with two guitar players, probably one guy played rhythm and the other guy went wheedly wheedly and was playing the lead stuff, right? There have been plenty of bands that have, diffused that differentiation to some extent or another. But my idea was that even if we grow out of the garage band era of our musical life, we still kind of maintain in our minds this fallacy that there's a kind of guitar playing that uses chords and strumming and rhythms, and that's called rhythm guitar. And there's another kind of guitar playing that plays melodies, and that's called lead guitar or whatever. And in jazz, education is always being taught, well, here are your chords, here's the comping, here's the this and that, and here's your inversions and all that. And then over here, here's the lines. Now we're going to pretend to be a saxophone player and we're going to play lines. All of that stuff is good and it's time honored. But in some ways, it's just not true about the guitar. So one of the ways it makes it not true is that if I play this, well, if I asked you to sing what I just played, you would sing ba dee da dee da. You'd sing a melody. It happens that the top note is what we hear as a melody. So typically, if you're an average person, if you hear somebody play a chord, the melody note is the top note of that chord that you're perceiving, even if it's this. So we hear ba, da, 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 right? Some people might hear. Right? And then we would probably recommend that they become bass players because we need bass players to hear that part of it. It's not so difficult to hear the top note of a chord progression, even a fancy one. If I play this, except for that funny note that I hit accidentally, a sophisticated listener might go, ba, boo, doo, doo, and they could sing that melody that's produced by those chords. Some people, if they're even a little more sensitive, might be able to sing the bottom note of that business. It's a little harder to hear, right? And I also play it a little more quietly, so if I really banged on the lowest note in each one of those voicings, you might also be able to perceive that melody. But the melodies that most people can't perceive at all are the ones in the middle. So between this one being the top, and this one being the bottom, I've got two others. And that's where something wonderful is happening. That kind of stuff is what the cellos and the French horns, in an orchestra, those are those middle notes that everybody likes, but they're a little more elusive. So I have this feeling, and I try to practice this wisdom, that a chord progression isn't really a set of frozen things moving through space, but rather it's a completely fluid set of melodies, some moving more quickly, some moving more slowly, but all of them are moving. And hopefully, if we have good voice leading, we can make those melodies move in such a way that they sound like melodies. They're not disjointed or broken, or one voice falls away and becomes silent, and then two more voices return unexpectedly, those kinds of things. So in the realm of good voice leading, everything is a melody, including what we would normally think of as harmony. Every melody has a rhythm. There's not very many great melodies that don't have a rhythm. So that means rhythm, harmony, and melody are almost never separate unless you're playing an idiophone that doesn't create pitch. But even a drum set creates pitch if you're tuned into it, you know. So that's my take on this question about whether or not melody and harmony are separate, and how can we put the two together in a way that is, functional on the instrument. The other little small thing is that a piano player, when asked, do you play piano? No one ever says, do you play lead or rhythm? And you ask, why do they say that? Or why doesn't anybody say that? Because the piano is taught and conceived primarily as a whole instrument that can play harmony and rhythm and melody all together. And so can guitar players do that. Now, if you want to, strum guitar in a folk band, in a folk situation, or play in a punk rock band or whatever, maybe these kinds of considerations wouldn't be as important, because there's some stylistic things that dictate what you might play in those kind of environments. But particularly in the realm of jazz, bossa nova, Latin music, blues, all of these kinds of musics that are improvisational and don't have as many tight strictures about what we can do as guitar players, I think that it's a really good idea to see the guitar as a whole thing that can do all of those things, sometimes simultaneously. Sometimes you would concentrate on one aspect or another, depending on the role that you're in a solo guitar situation versus a big band or something like that. The role would change quite distinctly. But the guitar is a whole instrument. So the polyphonic guitar, meaning a guitar is an instrument that can play more than one voice at a time. And it may look like I'm playing a series of what we call chords and a bunch of fingerings. And that is true to some extent. But how we think about it will determine how fluid our concept is. If we think of just a bunch of fixed grips, little pictures that we're moving from place to place, then maybe we'll have a kind of a quick-moving frozen concept. But I'm interested in developing and talking about and teaching about a fluid concept, which is more of the melodic flow of all of the voices in the harmony. I'm finished. Thank you.
It's interesting to hear that, because that makes a lot of your playing make sense. When you start to think of the inner voicings as their own characters and with their own jobs and their own places to go, that's how you come up with some of the lines you come up with, where maybe we're not thinking of just presenting chords as a block, or you start your bars with a full chord, but then what happens later is inner voice movement, and it's not as predictable as someone who might just be jumping from chord to chord and changing that high note, or just playing walking bass. You're using those inner voices for their rhythmic and their melodic potential much more than I think most people are, and that seems like it's a mindset shift.
Yes.
By thinking of it like
Don't
that.
say that too many times.
Yeah, I nearly got us flagged on YouTube.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Luke. I try my best. I'm not as influenced by guitar players, although I have my favorites, like you all probably do. But I'm highly influenced by pianists, and especially orchestras. And for me, it's like a miniature orchestra. Segovia said something kind of interesting and I think profound. He said, playing guitar is like looking through the wrong end of a pair of binoculars at the world. and you just see the whole thing, but it's just a little bit smaller. And so we need to edit, we need to slim things down, but we can do things like sustain. And move. We can do things like this. Sustain and move, hold something and then bring something else in. We can play things like this. We can echo, we can reference the melody in the inner voices, we can move the bass. We can ignore any of those things. We could slim it down to the point of playing. So I'm playing maybe in a sort of a Bill Evans-ish way there, where there's melody and then the accompaniment chords are punctuating the melody with phraseology. All of those things are possible if we just open our minds to this thing I call melodic harmony. It's a catchphrase in some ways, which is not perfect, but it's better than some of the other terminology that we could come up with. To describe something that a piano player doesn't have to give a name to, because they call it piano playing, which is very efficient, right? What if we said guitar playing was this thing that I just did? Maybe one day it might also just remain a very esoteric aspect of what the instrument is capable of doing, because the guitar by its very nature is a populist instrument, which is based in a folk music tradition, and it doesn't need to be that sophisticated for everybody to enjoy it. So anyway, I call it melodic harmony.
Nice. I forgot to mention, guys, feel free to message your questions whenever they come to you. Don't feel like you've got to sit on them, because you'll probably forget. I know I do. So we've actually got a question based on that from Reese. How much of these concepts do you relate to counterpoint from a Baroque perspective? So I suppose the other question is that something you've studied as well?
Enough to get myself into trouble. But I'll tell you what is different in my mind. In Baroque music, Baroque, however you say it, Baroque music, I say it Baroque. If you study it, what you're doing is learning a bunch of rules that establish how to take the basic melody, what do they call it, terra firmis or something like that. They give you a basic melody, then you're instructed about methodologies for creating a second melody, etc. In that kind of counterpoint education, harmony isn't discussed much, because the rules suggest that how to handle that, right? In my approach to polyphony and counterpoint, I think I combine something that I need to know about, which is harmony, chord qualities, and so I then created systems for making contrapuntal approaches to a fixed harmony. So, for instance, I'll take this song I was playing earlier, is called Cherokee. Cherokee is an old standard, and when you learn it at first, you probably learn it like this. Then you might learn the melody. Not a very interesting melody, actually. And then you either think, oh, I'm playing chords, or I'm playing melody. Then you might transcribe and try and learn some licks to play over it, all these kinds of things. And that's standard, actually time-tested way of learning how to handle that as a jazz piece. What I tried to discover is that I had learned that way as well, and I didn't want to abandon it for a completely melodic informed counterpoint methodology. So what I tried to do is I combined the two, and I used the harmony to inform what my melodic choices might be. So I figure, why throw away that wealth of harmonic understanding and knowledge? So I started by doing simple things like to take a melody and then play a line underneath it, or hold a melody and then move something against it. And then maybe I said, okay, well, that's interesting. What about if I look at pairs of notes? And breaking up my harmonic picture so that I can sustain some notes and move other notes, but it's all still in the rubric of the changes of the song. And so that's my answer to that question: is there is a crossover point between Baroque harmony Baroque counterpoint and what I do contrapuntally on the instrument, but mine is sort of leans toward the harmonic content being the still kind of the underpinning of what I'm doing and how I'm thinking about it.
Nice. That was beautiful. I think some people agree with me in the chat. So someone said, I want that in the book. There's some contrapuntal stuff in here, isn't there?
Well, it's all contrapuntal. Truth be told, right?
Yep.
Counterpoint just means the movement of voices. And so if you play this, that's counterpoint as well. Whether it's good or not, the verdict is out. But there are some things that are, usually when people think of counterpoint, they think of a couple of different things. Contrary motion, for instance, is one of the most beautiful types of counterpoint. And it's when one note moves up and another, or one series of notes moves up and another series of notes moves down. There are some things like that in the book. And yet there are also other kinds of counterpoint, like oblique motion, which I really think is handy for us. It's like if I say all the things you are, that's kind of thing called oblique motion, where one note stays put and another set of notes moves against it in one direction or another. There's parallel motion. They're all over in the book. But we had designed originally a counterpoint section for the book. And then as the book got too big, we realized the book was full of counterpoint, and so we didn't need a specific section for it. My approach to playing is contrapuntal. But it's not, and then at least that's how I think about it. Even the block chord business is counterpoint in a parallel fashion. So a long answer to your question is there is no specific section called the counterpoint section, but every section has counterpoint in it.
Of course. Nice.
Which is actually a tricky way of teaching counterpoint, because if you tell somebody you're teaching them counterpoint, their eyes roll back in their head. But if you don't tell them, but you teach it to them anyway, then they are liable to be more receptive.
You got to sneak it in. And yeah, sorry, a counterpoint section would be redundant given how much counterpoint there is.
Perhaps. And I'd be happy to hear from anybody that says, they want more or something like that.
So I've had some questions, just to do some more housekeeping on the book. I had some questions. Someone's asked if the first book is a prerequisite. It's not that they're completely standalone products. The first book is a chord dictionary. This is a collection of phrases and language and kind of etudes. Someone's asked about the etudes. We've got some standards where you've played whole A sections, you've done full choruses of the blues. And one way to look at them is etudes, but they're also um, combinations of phrases and ideas. Originally, we were thinking about chopping them up, but it did a disservice to the fact that everything you play has a context.
That's
So if I
right.
chopped up the first four sections of a blues and we just went, here's loads of, bars 9 to 12 of a blues, it's kind of robbing you of the idea of, how you like to weave that thread through them all. So really there's loads of stuff in here once you get into it. I think that's answered the main questions. And yes, PDF, you can go to guitarvivo.com and it'll tell you about the paperback and the PDF. Right. Should I hit some more questions? We've got.
I have one little thing to say, Luke, about the way the two books relate to each other.
Yes.
The first book is a chord dictionary, that's for sure, but it's also got in there a whole section on systematic inversions, for instance, and that is something that would definitely relate to the content of this book. In fact, we couldn't put that information in this book because it would have made it too large. But since it already existed in the first book, I felt like it was okay. Because one of the things in order to be able to create the harmonic underpinning for melodies that are wide ranging is you need to know your inversions. It's just the way it goes. One way or another, you need to learn how to play basic major, minor, dominant, and minor 7 flat 5 and diminished chords up and down the fingerboard in a way that would be then used to support a melody that's moving up and down the fingerboard. So in the book, the first chapter is melodies and harmonies that are on static harmony, right? One chord for a longer period of time. That's helpful, but it's only scratching the surface. If you were to go into the inversion section in the dictionary in book number 1, you could do the first exercise in the book by times 100 because there's much more information about inversions in the first book than in the second one. So they do complement each other very much. I don't know if one is necessarily a prerequisite for the other, but they definitely complement each other.
Yeah. Someone's asked about bonus content. Yes, there's videos of everything, which is there's a ton of videos and audio of everything. We've got Sibelius files. I think Guitar Pro files are going up as well, and I think there's a bonus masterclass. Yeah, the reason he's asked that is because he's got the first book, so he knows how overboard we go, how overboard we went with that first book. Tim did a masterclass for us on the website a year ago, and that had no home, so we've just bundled that in as well with this book. So yeah,
and this one will be too as well, right?
Yeah, we'll put this in there as well. We'll leave this up in the channel for a bit, give everyone a chance to watch it, but then this will be archived in the bonus content of the book. Right, I've got tons of great questions coming in.
Go. I'll try.
You want a thought, or should I go for it?
No, you go ahead.
I'm gonna have to scroll up all the way to the top to. Oh, okay, right. Are you familiar with Barry Harris's scale of chords concept, his 6 diminished scale? Is that something you've ever looked into?
Yes. I know about Barry, and I know that he's created a way of teaching this concept that's specific for particularly bebop and jazz vocabulary. It's wonderful. I know at least cursorily what he's talking about and all of that. I learned something from Ted Greene in the 80s that is, in my opinion, I use it a lot. It generally produces the same results in many ways, and yet there's a little bit of different language associated with it. So yes, I'm familiar, but I don't subscribe to the Barry Harris methodology so much, but I have to know about it because people come to me with questions about it, and I think it's a good system, particularly in the absence of any other system. It's a great system. I learned from Ted about a kind of a more, maybe it's based a little more in classical theory, although that's not, it doesn't color it so much. I just think of it as any chord can be, any chord or any inversion of any chord can be preceded by or approached by its what I call leading tone diminished chord, and to intersperse those things freely is much of what I try to do. Often it ends up in my arrangements, or I do it spontaneously. So there is crossovers. I guess it's just two different ways of talking about a similar thing.
Okay, so you're about to make someone very happy, because someone has asked multiple times this question. He's asked about how to use diminished chords in the blues. So how to use diminished chord inversions sophisticatedly in the blues. So I think maybe why don't we just start with, can you explain that leading tone diminished chord briefly for us?
Okay.
And then give us some examples, then we can go to the blues maybe, or maybe the two altogether.
If I play a C7th chord in a regular way, you know, and then I do what I call systematic inversions of that chord, which means that I'm going to play it same 4 notes. Oops. I played a prettier chord, but it was the wrong one. So on that set of strings, there are 4 voicings that include those 4 notes. Each one of them has a different melody note on top, a different bass note on the bottom, all of which are chord tones, and the middle 2 notes are also different switching places, right? So this one would be C7 spelled 1-5 flat 7 3. This one would be C7 spelled 3 flat 7 1 5. This one would be 5 1 3 flat 7, and this one would be flat 7 3 5 1. Now, it's all still C7, but what I can do is I can intersperse B diminished so I get a kind of bouncing back and forth between C7's sound and then what turns out to be a diminished chord, which is functioning as a 5 chord or an approach to C7. It turns out then that I get a little bit more chromaticized information in the bass and in the melody. And this can be done for any type of chord that you want to approach. You can play this chord, then play the diminished, and then bounce back to it. So if I'm playing a blues, if I play just a bounce back, which that's what Ted called it, jump back or bounce back. There's my leading tone diminished to F. Here it is to B to C7 again. There I just approached A7 from below. Now what I just did is I took a 1-4-5 type chord progression that we might think of as a blues, and I approached various inversions of the chords, and all of those were root position chords, with what I call the leading tone diminished, which is the diminished 7th chord, which lives 1 fret below the root of, or 1/2 step below. It's not, sometimes if you're playing with inversions, the lowest note isn't the leading tone, and it might be a whole step below. The chord might look like it's a whole step below. Anyway, play around with this idea. So we're going to approach C7 with B diminished 7. We're going to approach F7 with E diminished 7, which is a different diminished chord than the B. And then we're going to approach G7 with F sharp diminished and intersperse them and play around, use inversions, and all of a sudden we've got something that might sound like this. etc. So mostly what I was doing there was I was using inversions of the three chords in a blues, C7, F7, and G7, and approaching them with diminished seventh chords whose root was a half step below those chords in various inversions.
Just to be that guy. If you watched that and thought, I wish I knew some of that, there are 5 full blues, like what's it, harmonic, what are we talking about, melodic harmony kind of arrangements. They're kind of that. They live in this space where you could easily turn them into a solo, or you could turn them into an accompaniment, depending on how you've internalized them and put them to work. So yeah, in the book there are 5 of those that are worth checking out. So
And
that
by the way,
was
I should say, Luke, let me just interject for a sec.
yeah, please.
The material in this book is not stuff that I wrote and got really, kind of arrangey about. Well, he says they're arrangements. They're not arrangements. They're improvisations. Everything in this book is basically me improvising in the moment. The video caught it. Someone else wrote it down, and then I talked about what I was thinking about when I did it, right? So in some ways, the reason I did it that way is I didn't want there to be a bunch of, crazy knuckle buster fancy things. I wanted it actually to be real about what I actually do, how I actually think when I'm actually playing, right? And so, of course, there were videos that didn't make the cut because they weren't clear, or I dropped a beat, or I did things like that. But everything that's in the book, I actually played it in the tempo that it is on the video for the time in the moment that you're actually hearing it. And I think what that does is it lends some authenticity to this, that you can be convinced that at least in some respect it's playable. And you might have to work hard to get it there, but it is playable by a human being. And also it's me being me rather than me trying to say, well, here's an idea, a concept, or a theory, and here's what it might, you might do to get there. It's just me playing and doing the thing that I do. If someone hands me a guitar and I sit down and play, that's what comes out. So hopefully that is encouraging for you when you look at this material.
So that leads us on to a nice question here, which is what would be the best way to work on this material? So I think that's phrased, to be nice and bring the book into it, but it's also we could address on how you go about learning ideas in general and getting things into your playing. But we can start with the book and the best way to internalize these phrases.
Okay. I wrote a section called How to Use This Book, so I'll kind of reminisce about what I was thinking. One way to do it would be to start with the videos. And depending on how you learn, if you're a sight reader, then maybe don't start with the videos. Maybe never watch the videos. Could be interesting because then you can interpret it and come up with something that's directly from the page to what you hear. Of course, I don't want anybody to play exactly what's on the page because that in some ways is not the point. The page is there to give you an idea of what you can do to expand and what you can expand on, what you can personalize. So you might just sight read it and get good ideas from it. You might watch the videos and then say, oh, I like that one, and then stop and then go try and listen to it a lot, learn the melody, hum the melody, listen and see if you can get it by just watching, then go and check your work with the page, right? That might be a more tried and true guitar-centric way of learning, because usually we learn by listening to a record and then putting our ears on it and trying to copy. Sometimes we might make a mistake, which might be completely, worth saving, right? We might miss something, but we still like the sound of it. Then it's yours. That's great. That's wonderful. A way to do it. Then you can always check your work by looking at the book. Another way to do it is to march through the book, because it is progressive. It's not like all the easy stuff's at the beginning and all the hardest stuff is at the end, but we develop the book so that we say, well, what do you do when there's one chord? Oh, what do you do when there's two chords in a progression? What do you do when there's three chords in a progression? What are some common ways where there's more chords in a progression? How do I move around and get through those? You know, what about if it's a Latin feel? What if it's a swing feel? What if I'm playing a walking bass? What do I do then? So it moves through the book like that. If that's the way you learn, I don't know if there's many people that actually learn in that sort of start at the beginning and march all the way through to the end. I'm not sure. I have never met one before. But you might be that person, and you might only get to page 10 and then say, okay, I got the next 5 years worth of work to do. I'm going to come back to this later, you know. But I can guarantee you one thing. The one way that probably happens more often than not is that you buy the book, you open it up, you flick through it, some air blows by your face as you flip through it, and then you put it on the shelf. And I'll guarantee you that's a surefire way not to learn a thing from it. So the best way to learn it is to open it up and dive in and be yourself and do what you naturally do and try and be excited by the material. I think that's why the videos are such a powerful component. Not only did I make the videos and then the music was written down as a result. And so you hear the musical intention. It's not me sight reading something that I wrote before. It's me just winging it and playing. That can be, I think, very encouraging and helpful. But any way you do it, how have you done it before? You know, how's the best way that you work? You have to be in touch with that about yourself. Everybody has to learn about how they learn.
I think this will answer a couple of questions, but people have been asking about how you control your dynamics. Not just how, but why? Do you have a thought? Like, are you trying to make melody notes always louder than bass notes? So people have some questions about that. But I just want to say that reinforces what you're saying about making the most of the videos and the audio, because you will hear these, the articulation and the intention that these things are meant to be played with, according to your artistic choices. But they're pretty good choices.
Not the only way they can be played, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the nice, in some ways for me, the exciting thing about putting this material out into the world, after having just the only way I ever put it out into the world before was by playing it and then someone would listen to it. But by writing it down and having a little bit more help for it, I'm so curious about what anybody else might do with it and do better and do it more interestingly and make it their own. So I really hope that it turns into something that isn't just imitation. The music, inherent in the music, and this is no secret, everybody knows this, those black dots or those little numbers, they're so little that they tell you. It seems like it's a huge amount of information, but it's only a tiny little bit of the actual information in the musical performance. The rest of it is up to each of us. That's why for years and years and years, I followed my teacher's advice and his methodology, which is what I would present to my students, and I still do, is these grid pages. Who's seen my grid pages? Okay. We were going to
Someone has asked, does this book have the grid style notation or regular?
No, we had to lose the grids. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough room for the grids, and the music is such that I didn't think we needed them. I wanted it to be in there, but we couldn't. But the reason I like the grids is it tells you where to put your fingers for certain sounds, but it doesn't tell you what sounds to make. And then the musician themselves have to find the music inside of them to interpret that. And I think that's valuable because if it gets written down like this, I think there's a chance that some people might look at it as a classical piece and then try and perform it as an interpretation. And I really think that much more valuable than that would be take 2 bars of something and just steal the crap out of it and make it your own, you know, and then turn it into something else. I mean, then it would be the best. For me, that would be the best. The dynamics of the mostly the right hand, but some of the left hand as well. When I am not with a guitar, I hear music in my mind. And it's one of my ways of entertaining myself and musing and hearing music and conceiving of music. And when I hear it, it's on the perfect guitar, played perfectly, as well as I can conceive it. When I play the guitar, I just try and duplicate that. So certain notes are louder, certain notes are softer, certain notes are shorter, certain notes are longer. And what I try and do when I touch the steel strings on this guitar is an effect that is referencing the music that I hear in my mind. When I go searching for something on the guitar, it's because I hear it in my mind and maybe I don't know how to put my fingers on it yet, and I learn how to do that. The technique that I use has been born as a result of me trying to make it sound a certain way because I hear it. I want to play it like that. I often joke that if anybody played, if there were records that I could hear that played the way I want to hear it, I wouldn't have to play. I know it's a little twisted. I still love to play. But I play with these guys over here, unless I'm playing with a pick and some of these guys. But even when I do that, dynamics are profoundly important. Because if you get the guitar profiles that are going to be available, or the Sibelius files that are going to be available for this book, and you play them, and then you listen to what I played that they're trying to tell you about, it's nothing like it. I mean, it's accurate to a metronomic grid, but all the notes are the same velocity. All the notes, there are no dynamic information in the guitar profiles or the Sibelius files that I know about. We didn't put those in. In a real classical music score, maybe the dynamics would be in there, but they aren't in here. So if I play this, on Guitar Pro with no dynamics, it sounds like this. Oh shit! I can't do it. You know, it doesn't sound. Certainly doesn't sound to me like I wanted it to sound. So what that means is the importance of the dynamics is profound. It doesn't sound as beautiful or as interesting or swing as hard or anything without the loud and soft going on. If you just look at loud and soft, I kind of take it into three categories. Any note that you play has loud and soft, long and short, or sooner or later. Any note you play, whether you're playing one note or a bunch of notes, all of them have to have those, at least minimally those characteristics. Do I want the top note to be louder or softer than the rest of the notes? I like it to be a little louder. Do I like the middle voices to be louder than the top note or quieter? I like them a little quieter. Do I want them to be all happening at the same time? Or do I want to use the sooner or later part of it? I like it when the notes are a little separated from each other, so they all have a little bit of their own space. And you wouldn't necessarily write it as being separated, but you know, really microscopically, they're all occurring in what I call the variation or the interspersion of the vertical event. So this looks like one thing, but I play it like this, maybe, or something. All right, so I say, right, if I play those middle notes too loud, they're going to overwhelm the melody or the bass, and I want them to be there and heard, and I don't want them to be too loud. Sometimes this gives the transcribers a bit of a headache. In fact, there may be some examples of notes that were left out of the transcription because they weren't audible, but if I could take away all the rest of the notes, they're there. Right? And I just got I just got worn out trying to convince the guys of that. So there's a few places where you see my finger over here holding a note and it's not on the tab or on the notation. Try it instead and add it if you like it. Okay. So yeah, the dynamics is important. I'll give you a quick little exercise that can help to do this. And I'm going to try and make, this is the crib notes version. Take a chord that you like. I always say C major 7. And then play it all at once, all 4. And then play it all 4 notes, but make the top note louder. Now play it all at once, but make the G string louder. You can't do it. It's really hard to do. But I am convinced that if you try to do it, so you try to play all 4 notes at once, but make one note louder than the rest each time, you're going to develop a sensitivity, at least, to the volume of the notes that you're playing while you play either simultaneous notes or you play separate notes, okay? And then couple that with this beautiful little exercise. Play a C major scale harmonized. In this particular case, it's harmonized 1, 5, 7, 3, and then sing the top line along with your playing. Na, 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 na. Now, sing the G string without cheating. Hear the G string as it lives inside of that note. Na, 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 etc. Now hear the D string and sing it. Try not to cheat and go, right? Try and play all the notes. No, 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 right? Train your ear to actually hear more than just the top note or the bottom note when you play a chord. It takes work. Train your ear to actually hear the inner voices. When you start hearing them, exactly at that moment that you start to hear them, you'll start to appreciate them. You'll start to want to control them. You'll start to want to influence whether they're loud or soft or anything like that. Until you actually hear those things, you probably are kind of oblivious to them, right? And you're just, whacking away on this thing. That's okay too. That's where you start. But go deeper.
That thing about trying to hear the inside notes and take me back to the live stream we did the other day with Levi doing Bruce Foreman stuff, and trying to transcribe that, and training yourself to have an ear that can discern those inner notes is life changing. Or at least your musical life will be changed by developing that ability.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to tell everyone is Tim did an interview with That Pedal Show, and if you guys know That Pedal Show, it's a show about pedals, and Tim's not the most pedally guy. But I remember being in that room and hearing you demonstrate the first gain stage, hearing you demonstrate the breadth of dynamics and articulation and tone timbre that you get from that right hand, and hearing it in that room with those guys that have heard every pedal under the sun, and everyone being awestruck by the versatility or the breadth of color that right hand could produce. And it's no mystical thing. It's these exercises. It's listening to it. It's putting it through the ringer.
Yeah, and getting the physical ability to do something. Once you understand its importance, to be able to physically do it takes time and patience, but it's possible.
Nice. So I recommend anyone after we're done here, go and check out that interview, and you'll see the exact bit I'm talking about. Also, I thought they were going to crop me out of that. You go to me for a line, and I feed you guys a line, and they left my voice in, and it's me standing grumpy. So you'll also hear that if you watch that video. Right. Let's go on to some more questions.
Yes, please.
Someone's asked, do you have an interesting way to practice inversions?
As opposed to a boring way, you mean?
As opposed to just being a very systematic. So maybe how can someone start putting inversions to use, like as a very like beginner level guitarist?
Okay.
or early intermediate?
Well, one thing that you might not appreciate, but inside of every big chord are a bunch of little chords. So when you play the Bob Dylan C chord, you're also playing a root position C chord, a first inversion C chord, and a second inversion C chord. So first of all, please don't be of the mindset that inversions are some scary, important thing that only the brainiacs know about. Okay? Every big chord that you play, right, contains a bunch of smaller chords which can be utilized. So for instance, to bring it really close to home here, if I'm playing a C chord in a soul R&B kind of environment, I'm probably not going to go all night long. I might do that. There are some songs where that might be the sound, right? But without moving my hand or without radically changing the fingering over here, I might leave some notes out. I could play something like this. And then that creates a ba 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 doo ba bo bo ba doo bo right underneath that chord. That I might, if I just learned it and I've been struggling just to get it, and I'm happy when I can get all the 6 notes clear, I might not exactly understand that there's potential in here for all kinds of cool stuff. And then if I start adding a few notes, I might find that my little chicka chicka, with a little bit more control, yields a whole orchestra of possibility. And then my big problem is, well, don't play too many of those things, because you got to play a part that's discernible and everybody can dig. So you got to leave out about half of those cool ideas because you want to play a really fixed part. Well, good news is the next song you can do a different set. And that's just one chord. Imagine that there's 3 or 4 or 5 chords in a song. You can start creating these little orchestrated bits just with triads, just with the smaller bits of the bigger things. So that's my first preach about inversions, is don't be afraid of them. Now, the next thing that you might do, and I would recommend this, is look at systematic inversions of triads. Once you've learned how to play the big chords, the bar chords of the cage system and all that junk, then start taking 3 adjacent strings of any of those big shapes and systematically move them up and down. Systematic means if I have this, my G chord on the top 3 strings, that's spelled 3, 5, 1. And then what I want to do is I want to move 3 up to 5, 5 up to 1, and 1 up to 3. And now I have something called 5, 1, 3. And I do that again, and I have something called 1, 3, 5. Right? Those are the 3 inversions of that particular thing. And I want to know that. I want to know where they are, how they're spelled and all that. And then I want to work them so I can find them. And I don't need to give them any other names other than just the spelling of that particular triad. And then you can connect them. I'll put a D7 there to get me home. Right? And then I have a system. I think that's kind of interesting. Right? Do it on another set, do it on another set, do it on another set. Now I've got a bunch of systems that I can move up and down. Right? And if I'm going to play a song that has 3 chords in it, and I can move each one of those chords so that any of the notes in the chord is the melody note, etc., suddenly I have a more orchestrated perspective, right? And in my experience, I think it's been about 50 years since I've been playing in bands, making records, doing all sorts of things. I don't think anybody has ever said these words to me. Hey, Tim, don't play those really nice, tasty fills behind the vocal. with those cool triads. No, don't stop doing that. No one's ever said that. They might say, "Hey Tim, stop doing that," but no one ever said, "You know those tasty little things, those little cool orchestrated things? Yeah, don't do that." You know, so it's a good idea to learn how to do that.
Nice. Just on that topic, someone's asked, for that kind of level of stuff, that this simple stuff, where can people go? Is there a TrueFire course at this level?
Yeah, there's a thing called Melodic Triads on TrueFire, and I think it's really concise. It's all in one key, so you need to do some work after the fact, and it might only be on 2 string sets of the 4 that we have, but it's a great introduction. There's etudes and studies, and then there's a couple of pieces that are fun to play as well. But let me just show you something to get excited about, particularly about triads and inversions. Okay, I'm going to play a blues in A, and I'm going to use only triads that are generated from major scales. Right. So if you play this, someone might say, "Yeah, but man, how do I make that more interesting? What's the cool hip stuff that all the hip guys want to use?" Well, here it is. I'm gonna do it with my fingers. 1, 2, 3. All triads. They don't sound like an Alpo commercial when you do them that way. I always think of this, it sounds like, you know, a TV commercial for laundry soap or something, you know, but you know, you don't have to play them like that. You can apply all the information you learn by systematically organizing your triads to all kinds of music, because I can also play something like this. You know, some sort of quasi pretty sound. So, man, triads are the foundation of all the different Western musics, and regardless of what kind you aspire to play, whether it be Delta blues or sophisticated fusion or R&B or neo soul or whatever, if you don't have your triads together, you are missing out. So get them together.
So Colin has come in with a confirmation. Melodic Triads is great. So that's your course.
Thank you,
TrueFire.
Colin.
It's where I started learning from Tim. Awesome. So we've had some questions. We've had a comment and some questions. Let me read the comment first, because it will probably inspire some interesting thoughts. I really like your comment about making the examples in the book playable. I love Ted Greene's books, but my only complaint might be that some of the examples are impossible to play, at least for me. So that's the first comment, which is incredibly essential and was a part of our production process, that they had to be playable and usable. Otherwise, who's it for? But the next question we've got is, are these books based on Ted's work? And can you explain a little bit about what you learned from Ted and your educational background?
First thing is the playability factor of books in general. I didn't write this. I mean, I have plenty of videos that are available and recordings that are available that show, you know, fancy music, my playing or whatever. I don't tend to be a real virtuoso, over the top technical player, unless you try and do something that I do, and then you realize that there's hidden difficulties that may not be appreciated because the music might not be going by very quickly. But so I have to do say a caveat about what Luke said. They were playable by me. and because they're my vocabulary, the stuff in the book. There may be things that are difficult for you to play in the book that are a little stretchy or something, but I believe that if you work on that, you can conquer that, or if you're creative, you can get around the difficulties, and I'm totally encouraged that. So there's that. The thing about Ted is he looms large in my musical education. I studied with him. I was influenced by him in many ways. And I've continued to study the work that he's done, and mostly because I just love the beauty of it. It's just beautiful to me, you know. And yet 40 some years have passed since I saw him last or took a lesson from him or whatever. And some of his ways were quirky, and when I was younger, I was maybe enamored with that quirkiness. And now, as I'm a little more seasoned and have taught many, hundreds and thousands of my own students, I see that there may be some things about his quirkiness that don't translate very well to, the average student. Ted was a completist, so he couldn't write chord chemistry any other way. He had to put every single A triad on those first 3 pages. It just had to happen. It's just the way he is, and yet one of the reasons I think that the melodic chord dictionary is some way a new mousetrap is that we decided to leave a lot of stuff out because it wasn't playable or it wasn't something that I would naturally do. And then organizing it by the melody note created a system of organization that was actually discoverable rather than just 4 or 5 pages of randomly, placed every A major chord I can think of kind of thing. So that's not a criticism of Ted's book, although he did call it chord catastrophe when he was joking around. So I think that if I didn't digest and make my own of the material and the premises and the conceptions that I learned from Ted, I would be failing him. Ted didn't want me to be like little Ted. He told me more times than I can actually remember, no, Tim, just do it like you do it. Do it your own way. Don't try and be like me. He didn't like that at all. He wanted me to learn from him and then make it my own. Joe Diorio was the same way. I studied with Joe probably in a more concentrated fashion than I did with Ted. And Joe would never let me just be an imitation. He wanted me to do my thing. And that's why I feel so strongly about that the book isn't for me to generate a bunch of imitators, but rather inspire you to find something of your own. If you can't do it, that's an opportunity. So if I play a passage in the book and you look at it and you think it sounds great and you want to learn it and you realize that your little finger just won't go there, right? Or it won't do that or whatever. You can't do one of the things or 2 of the things. That's an opportunity for you to come up with your own way to do something that resembles the original thing, that's actually your own way, right? So that's my idea about that.
Nicely put. Okay, right. Let me just filter some of these questions. Just going back to that, right? We talked a bit about right hand technique. How much is flesh versus nail on the right hand?
Okay, that's easy to say. It's all flesh. Every finger's got a nail on it. It's very short. It's very polished, and it acts as kind of a glide-off point for the plucking, but the plucking is coming off of the flesh. So let me give you an example. Here is a C note on the top string plucked with the flesh. Here's a passage all plucked with the flesh of my first finger. Here's that same stuff with the fingernail. As much as I can do it. What I use the fingernail for is to have a place that kind of acts like a backstop to the downward pressure of into the flesh. But I don't usually, you don't usually hear the nail, except for one exception. You don't hear the nail plucking the string. Now, because of the ergonomic of the hand, notice this finger here is a little shorter than the other ones. And when I cup my hand to make the shape of my plucking hand, my little finger is a little shorter, so I grow a little nail on that. So the one exception to the flesh rule is that I have a nail on my little finger to make it a little bit longer, and I'll use it to make the top note of a chord a little brighter and a little bit more obvious. Check the difference between this. That's my little finger, and then here's my third finger. There's a little different tone. And not only is that little finger about 2 inches closer to the bridge than my first finger, giving it a brighter sound, it also helps to pronounce that melody note. And also, I love 5-note chords. I can't get away from them. So you can hear, if you're really listening carefully, you can hear a slightly brighter, slightly more defined, maybe less round tone on the top string of a 5-note chord. And that's the little finger. I have a very slight nail on my thumb, but I never use it to pluck bass notes unless I'm playing harmonics. Because when you play harmonics, you need to tilt your thumb toward the string in order to get the position. It's too big of a subject to talk about much right now, but I use a little bit of a nail on my thumb to be able to play those passages when I use harmonics.
Beautiful. Maybe we should do a whole other masterclass on harmonics. That would be amazing.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. That's fun.
Sorry,
And also
chordal
harmony and harmonics. That'll be our class. We'll do that.
Yep. Someone's just said, I just have to help someone out. They were trying to find the book on your website. It's on guitarvivo.com. If you go there, it'll give you the choice to go to Amazon for the paperback or to buy the PDF. And we're running a special.
Thank you. I'm a little slow getting it on mine. It'll be on mine as well, but it'll just link you back to Guitar Vivo, so you might as well go directly there.
And also, during this week, while we leave this up on the channel, we'll keep that discount, a sale price on the first book and on this new book and on the first book. So if you go to the guitarvivo.com and you get PDFs, you can get the first book as well for just $14.99 as a little bundle offer. So we're coming to a bit of a close. I've got a few questions banked. If we can get through them, maybe a couple of minutes each.
I'll give you the straightforwardest answer.
Okay. Well, the first one.
Speed
can
round.
You recommend a good book for authentic changes to jazz standards?
Yes. The book is called Every Record That's Ever Been Made, and you can get it these days on YouTube. And you have the link to get to that book is right here, and the gray stuff that's in between. But if you have to have the real book, start with that or finish with that or use your ear and check it with real book. The real book is not bad, but it's just not definitive. And it also steals from you the opportunity to do something that you really need to do, which is to develop your ability to hear the changes. Because I don't care how many books you have, if you get on a bandstand and someone says, Cherokee, okay, I know Cherokee, I got it right here. Key of D flat because the singer's here. Uh-oh, real book's not going to help me anymore much. So I need to be able to hear, I need to be able to think and act harmonically on my own 2 feet. And the best way to do that is to learn by listening to songs, listening to a lot of different versions of songs, finding out what you can hear, what you can't hear, and then fix what you can't hear, and memorize the tune in the simplest way possible with the greatest number of possible variations.
I will be cropping that and putting that on my Instagram. That was a great answer.
That's a short, huh? That's a short.
Yeah, that's a good short. Right. Next one. Did you often transcribe chord solos and chordal phrases? Did you transcribe a lot? I
No.
suppose is the main answer. Okay. Next question. How do you develop your left and right hand coordination?
Okay. Hearing the parts in your mind before you try and play them. And then maybe separating the parts so you really know what the left and right hand and the thumb and the middle fingers and all. You know what all the elements are. I think it's very interesting. If you play The Days of Wine and Roses and you play this. The days of wine and roses, laugh and run away like a child at play. Right? And then you stop and you think, what is the thumb doing? And then you think, oh, what's the D string? What's happening on the D string? The day, the wine and roses, laugh and run away like a child at play. And then you do the same thing for all the strings. Then you're going to start actually hearing the meaning of your music. And you'll start to develop an understanding of what's going on. Because you can't expect to develop a technique that allows you to separate things out if you don't know what the things are. So you need to learn what the musical elements are, and then it's a little easier, more doable to actually give them their own independent dynamics and their own independent life. Ted Greene told me something once that I think is pretty interesting and profound, and I still believe it. He says, Tim, when you make a note happen, you decide how it's going to enter the world. You decide how long it's going to live, and you decide when it's going to die. And you also decide what you're going to do with it while it's alive. And then, that's true, and then if you multiply it by 4 or 5, that's called solo guitar. It's a kind of a godlike principle, you know, in this little physical realm. You get to bring it to life. You get to give it life, decide what its life is going to be, and you decide when it's going to end. And if you believe that, you got a lifetime's worth of work to try and learn how to do that. Otherwise, it's just going to be random and somewhat chaotic, perhaps.
Another beautiful answer. Right. I've got a question. How did you practice your breathing? Is that something you've practiced? Because your breathing sounds to me like one guy swinging on a snare drum with a brush.
Oh, interesting. I've heard that before. The first, I started practicing my breathing at the moment of my birth. Okay, like the rest of you. And then I've continued practicing it every moment of my life since then. But as it applies to guitar, I would go like this. So I'm always singing. But then I realized that sometimes you can't do that because it sounds like a little squeaky toy, and you know, and it, you know, especially if you're recording or whatever. So then I thought, okay, well, and you know, if I lose my voice or I'm trying to sing in falsetto to get all those notes, I like doing that, and I really naturally do it. If you listen closely to some of my videos, maybe even some in the book's catalog, you might hear a kind of less articulated version of that. I might say. I'm not so much trying to find a pitch, as I am putting a breath to all of the articulations. So I didn't want to even make that much noise. So what I decided to do is I would kind of make my lips slightly pursed, and I would puff a little air for every note. Right? Then I could do it kind of silently. And then that sort of evolved into this sort of thing that I do, which is I breathe, I sing silently until the phrase is over, and then I take a breath in. And sometimes I even go, so that's where the snare drum thing comes in. So what it is I just can't keep my mouth shut, because what happens is, and this is my theory, if I'm articulating the music with my mouth in my breath, there's not very much room left over for me to be thinking about how much I'm sucking at the moment, right? Or worrying, or telling myself bad stories about how everybody else in the world is better than me and all that kind of stuff. Anybody can relate to that kind of thinking? Right? When you're practicing or when you're trying to play, oh shit, here comes the bridge. I don't know how to play that chord. Whatever it is, that talking has got to stop. That talking doesn't help you. It doesn't help your audience. You got to figure out a way to get rid of that talking. And I found that if I'm singing what I'm playing, I can't think. I just have to completely, that takes up all the brain power that I might have. You know what I was thinking about when I did that? That's all I got room for. And to me, that gets me closer to the music. So what that ends up being is this thing about my breath. I'm basically a trumpet player with no trumpet, you know.
Nice. And so someone's asked about, are you really thinking that on every note, or is this just something that happens intuitively? It's like a flow state kind of thing, right? It's just happening from years of practice.
Yeah, and so no thinking means no thinking. They're not thinking about no thinking. It's actually completely doing it, come what may, and then falling off the rails and having a moment, and then getting back on the rails and getting back into the flow. Vinnie Colaiuta recently had a conversation with Rick Beato, and he said, thought is the enemy of flow. That's pretty succinct right there. And you know what? I could tell that probably half of you don't believe that. Maybe more than half of you believe you have to have some good idea to be able to play something good. Try it. try doing without it. Let's see what happens.
Oh man, we've had some great questions that we're going to have to let go of, because we're coming to the end of our time here.
Oh no,
thank you to everyone.
Going. Keep going.
You want a couple more?
Yeah.
No? Yeah, okay. Actually, I will say, yeah, we can keep going. There's still a lively audience on YouTube, some 250 people.
Woo.
Or 225.
Hey,
hello, everyone. Wow. I've never had it where my Zoom rooms reach capacity before, so this is amazing. Wow. Thank you all for tuning in. We've had another question on the book, which I'll hold up. My turn now while I'm talking. This beautiful guy. Someone's asked, how does it differ from like a TrueFire course? Is there much overlap, or is it its own thing?
I mean, there's overlap, but the TrueFire, the model for TrueFire, and this is not a criticism at all, but it's a different model. The depth to which you can go into something on TrueFire is limited because of the way they want it to work. They want to have a bunch of 5-minute chapters that are teachable things, and that's great because there's a lot to learn. I think my courses on TrueFire are working within that system as well as possible. There's a performance, it's transcribed, there's a explanation or a breakdown, and etc. That's the model that I've used anyway. They do have some other things too, but I haven't really jumped into like the play alongs or the track things or the jam things or whatever. But this is, about I would say this book, in terms of the material, it's probably about 10 TrueFire courses in terms of the volume of the written material and the depth to which I can play variations. I mean, just the blues section in this book could be an entire TrueFire course. By the way, I just put out a TrueFire course about improvising chordally, melodic chordal improvisation on the blues. And so if you have a chance, or if you're a TrueFire person, please check that out, because it sort of focuses in a slightly different way than the blues section in this one. So they're both I mean, it's still me coming up with things to talk about my approach. So there's going to be that, right? And then this one just has a lot more written material and video content than the average TrueFire one does.
Nice. Got a question here from Reese. How do you follow where you are in a tune? Are you chunking? Are you thinking in smaller segments, or are you able to follow the grand scheme of things and know where you are at any point in time?
If I really know the song, I'm hearing the song, the melody, and I know the numbers, but I don't have to think about the numbers if I really know the song. So to me, knowing the song doesn't mean memorizing a litany of events. That might be part of the stage. F, E flat 7, A minor 7 flat 5, D7, G minor, C7, B flat minor, E flat 7, A, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. It might mean something like that, especially at first, because that's one of the processes. But when I know the song, I know it like a blues. If you know how to play a blues, you don't think, okay, now's the time to go to the 4 chord. Oh, wait, where do I go now? Oh, yeah, let me think. That's the 5 chord. You just hear it, right? You hear where you need to go, and everybody else that you're playing with, or if you're playing by yourself, you're leading yourself to there. So it's a long road to hoe, as they say in Woodland, California, but it's necessary. To really know a song means you know the song, And I know it was elusive to me for a long time. I thought, oh, I got to memorize the chords as a list of things. But then you play the song. I mean, it used to be you could play 5 nights a week, and then 5 nights a week you'd learn this stuff. Like you'd be so bored after the 4th night, 9 to 1, and that you'd start to realize, oh man, I know this song upside down, inside out, and backwards. And now we sort of like maybe learn it, memorize it in 2 or 3 days, and then we think we know it. Then we come back 2 weeks later and we can't remember anything about it because we don't play it enough. So play it, play it, play it, play it, play it. Have a song of the day, play it all day long. Have a song of a song of the week, play it all week long. Really get inside and live inside of these songs. Then you won't have to worry about memorizing names of things or lists of things. Okay? And learn the lyrics. There's a great story. Some great saxophone player, it's not clear who it was playing on a stage, and then they just stopped. And they kind of confusingly wandered off the stage. And maybe they were a little eccentric, this person I'm thinking of. And someone said, hey man, what happened? What happened? You were playing so great, and then all of a sudden you just stopped. Oh, I forgot the lyrics. That's a joke. Maybe it's true.
Nice. Someone's just asked, any word on triad pairs? I think this came up during the triad section. I suppose just to start with, is it something you use a lot? And then how do you use them in your style?
Yeah. Okay. A couple things about triads in general and their usefulness. Triad pairs, generally speaking, in modern parlance, means you take 2 triads that are somehow associated with each other by virtue of coming from a particular parent scale or something like that, and you pair them up, making a 6-note figure that you could then treat either as 2 parallel arpeggiated ideas, or a scale-like critter, which with the notes being reflected from each of the triads. So 3 from one triad and 3 from another gives you a septatonic thing, right? I think that's what it is. No, it's 6-note thing.
Hexatonic.
Hex? Really? I thought that was
Hex.
5. What's 5?
Pentatonic.
Oh, that's right. Okay. 6 thing. That's why you can tell I don't talk about this stuff much. But anyway, I use it a lot. So here's a couple of things about triads. If you want to know what the extensions, the 9, 11, and 13 of any diatonic chord is, so let's say I'm playing A7 in the key of D, and I want to know what's the 9, the 11, and the 13 of A7 in the key of D. Well, it's a B minor triad. Play a B minor triad, and you get the notes that live in the world of A7, but aren't in the basic dominant 7th chord, the 9, the 11, and the 13. It's very interesting. Now you can always find the extensions of any chord if you just play the triad that lives right above it in the key, right? So that's a kind of triad pair as well. So if you want to play a Lydian sound, for instance, and you want to have a Lydian effect, but you don't want to play a Lydian mode or Lydian scale, you realize that in a Lydian mode, there's 2 major chords right a whole step away from each other. They happen to be the 4 and the 5 of the parent key. And if you play, let's say A7 and B7, I'm playing a 6-note grouping of notes. Right, which gives me a sound of A7 sharp 11. So I can use a small thing like a triad to create the sound of a bigger thing like an A7 or A9 sharp 11, right? And so that's the benefit of triad pairs. I think that they're all the rage these days because a lot of the contemporary hippest players are using that concept, and it's a wonderful sound. It's not exactly a new sound, but it's wonderful. And before you can play around with triad pairs, you've got to become fluent with your basic triads, and which lends me to think there's a lot of people in music schools all around the world that want to play the hippest shit, excuse me, YouTube, but they don't know how to do the basic shit. So you can't play the hippest shit unless you know how to do the basic shit. There's another short for you.
I think that's got us banned in 6 different countries. Right.
Yeah.
We've got one last question here.
Okay.
Which is, actually, yes, someone in the comments, just one last time to give your TrueFire channel a plug. That's like the subscription thing where, well, what is a TrueFire channel? It's like a Patreon kind of thing in
similar.
TrueFire.
Yeah. If there is a model, it's similar to Patreon. Mine is a $10 per month subscription, and you have access to, at that level, all of the material that's in there. Right now, there's about 200 videos and a bunch of foundational material, and it's primarily the name of the channel is Solo Guitar Sensei, meaning that's my role. And so it's primarily focused on solo guitar arrangements, both simple and more complex. But there's some other material that's supportive of that that's available as well. And I put up a whole bunch of stuff at the beginning, and then lately I've been putting things up maybe twice a month of new arrangements or encouraging things. Excuse me.
Great.
Thank you for mentioning that, or letting me mention it.
No, of course. So I'll do one last thing about the book. Then we've got one last question that we'll get to. But I just want to make sure everyone's had their question answered on the book. And there's one thing I forgot to do, which is tell you what's in it. So the new book is out now. If you go to guitarvivo.com, you can see the link to get paperback on Amazon, PDF through the website. I'm just going to tell you the contents because everyone's asking, like, how does this overlap with TrueFire? This is all original created videos that we transcribed and then broke down. So it's not videos from anywhere else. And we start off chordal phrases on static harmony. So that was like our little cellular chord stream approach for major, minor, dominant, and minor 7 flat 5 chords. Nearly said half diminished.
Oh, they're diminished seventh
and
dimension.
diminished.
Yeah.
And diminished. Then chapter 2 is we've got phrases on, you know, the perfect cadence 1-5, 5-1, and 2-5-1s. Chapter 3 is extending that cycle 3-6-2-5s, 4-7-3, all that kind of stuff. Then we've got substitutions. Then we've got the etudes. We've got rhythm changes phrases, jazz blues phrases, and those jazz blues ones are full 12-bar things for you to study. Then chapter 7, intros and outros, which is, well, I think we're all guilty of not having a basic repertoire of those. Would you agree?
The intros and outros section is probably the catch-all because there's 2-5-1s in there, there's 3-6-2-5-1s in there, there's counterpoint, there's all sorts of stuff in there, all with the theme of how do we target an arrival chord and work our way back to it in some interesting way, particularly perhaps referencing the song that we're trying to do an intro or an outro for. And so that's kind of a broad and large chapter because it's such a catch-all for real useful stuff that includes all of the previous things.
And well, yeah. And then you have line cliches. Can you play us a line cliche for those that don't know what a line cliche is? You don't have to explain it. Just give us a couple.
No, a line cliche is when you have a static harmony. No New Year's Day to celebrate, or all those are on A minor. The most common line cliche is the minor line cliche with the root descending. I have 4 names for them. The 2 minor ones are root descending and 5 rising, and the same thing on major, root descending and 5 rising. So if you want to, in a pop music world, you want to know about line cliches, you have this song. Something in the way she moves attracts me like no other lover, right? And then on the bridge of that, don't want to leave her now. I don't want to leave her now, etc. So, but they're everywhere. They're from Irving Berlin to Britney Spears or Bruno Mars. So it just means that it's an internal line or a bottom line or a top line that moves while the chord is basically staying static. And cliche is not a negative in this regard. It's just something that gets done, common things. And so I just improvised a whole bunch of them, and some of them got in there. I could probably do 100 pages. I could probably do 100 pages on line cliches, but we had to make some choices. So.
Yeah, someone's just written line cliche equals Kesh, contrapuntal elaboration over static harmony. We were taught Kesh.
Wow, I never heard
that was the was it Hal Crook in his book Hearing the Changes. We were taught it was chromatic embellishment of static harmony. But yeah, all the same thing, all fancier ways to get you more students. I had to learn that, and you impress people with it.
And write hit songs.
And then, well, just for legal reasons, it's obvious Led Zeppelin isn't in the book, and the Beatles aren't in the book.
Sorry,
just so you know.
Now we've been banned in all of the.
Now we've been copyright striked as well.
Yeah, shoot. Take that part out.
Then we got 2 more chapters. We got common progressions from standards. We did, was it A Train and what was the other tune we did?
Take the A Train and Girl from Ipanema, which are basically the same. And then we did Someday My Prince Will Come. And,
beautiful. Yeah.
And then I also did My Romance, which didn't make the book. So maybe what we can do is take the My Romance thing at some point and add it to like some supplemental material because it was brilliant.
We can put it on the bonus section. We'll check it's transcribed and proof it, and then we'll add it to the bonus page.
Yeah. And then we'll figure it out.
One of my favorite chapters to go through, because I know that this is one of those chapters where I can just go there, play anything, and it'll just blow my socks off, was the parallel harmony and cinematic sounds chapter at the end.
It's people ask me what do you think about modes and where, what's modes and what this and that? And I think one of the best places to understand modal music is in movie soundtracks, especially recent ones, but even in all time. And it's the idea of taking a beautiful sounding shape. There's an example of a beautiful sounding shape. Or this. Right? Doesn't that evoke a kind of moodiness? And then moving it in some fashion. So to me, that's what I think of as a cinematic approach. It's not a chord progression necessarily. It doesn't have 2-5-1s necessarily. And so that section is full of my way of taking beautiful sounding nebulous chords and moving them around in parallel in a way that evokes a kind of feeling.
Nice. I've got to. So before I give you that last question, I've got to address some comments. Sorry. Jamie's asked, Luke, any plans for a blues rhythm comping book and a jazz lead book?
Yes.
Yes, we. Yes, watch this space. You'll get an update on YouTube that we're going live again in 6 or 7 months or a year. It'll be for those reasons. And then Jamie's asked, I'd love to see a gypsy jazz book on chords rhythm. The Picking One by Dennis Chang is ace. And do we have any more plans for books with Ross Campbell? Yes, we have plans for all of those. But also, just something I want to tell you guys is feel free to email me, luke@guitarvivo.com. If you've got any things you'd like to see, we're always doing more research into what people want and trying to put our mark. I mean, most books have been done, but we want to put our mark on the marketplace. So yeah, let us know what you want to see from us. Right, this final question, Tim. This person's probably been hanging on for 2.5 hours for this. If you were composing or arranging a tune from scratch, do you have a system that helps you harmonize the melody, or is it just completely up to one's own choices? So,
yes and yes. Let's say I want to, this is a big subject and I'm going to try and do it briefly. I think I might have touched on this in the last masterclass as well. So, but for instance, if I'm playing All the Things You Are, which is a classic song by Jerome Kern, the melodies goes like this. 3, 4, 2, 3. Etc. Right? So I learned that the basic chords of the song are F minor to B flat minor to E flat 7 to A. Now, one of the problems that I see is if you start with the chord and the melody is inconvenient to the fingering that you know, you're more likely to give the melody a kind of bad representation. Maybe you'll use an easier note or you'll skip a note or whatever. So I feel that the best way to learn a song is to learn the melody first, probably along the top couple of strings rather than in a position. And then rather than try and put the chords on that melody right away, just put the bass note, the root of each chord with the melody. And play it as beautifully as you can. And then when you've done that, you've established a physical parameter where the melody and the bass note live together. There might be some other alternative choices. You know, there might be maybe another set of choices. But rather than thinking it's endless and freaking out and giving up, just give, maybe you narrow it down to 1 or 2 good choices for where the bass note, the root of the chord, and the melody could live in proximity. Then something happens. You're limiting the way in which you can fill that chord out because you can't reach a note up here if you're playing this. Unless you do that, right? So I need to find the rest of an F minor chord, a pretty sound that I like or whatever, somewhere around here. Maybe I finger it here, maybe I finger it here, maybe I finger it here, right? Those are my three realistic choices with this bass note and that melody note. So maybe I want to say, I want to put a 9 and a flat 7. That's pretty, right? That's pretty interesting and modern sounding. Maybe I just want to play my regular old, Doobie Brothers chord, right? Maybe I want to play the 9 and something a little maybe I want sharp, like the natural 7. Ooh, that's pretty, right? So the first part of your question was, is there a system for finding out how to do it? And then the next part of your question is, or do you just do stuff that you like? Then the truth is you do both. You have a system which allows you to narrow down your possibilities, learn how to play the melody beautifully so you aren't going to give it short shrift, as they say, and then learn how to fill in the gap between what you consider to be the low note and what the color you want in between. Then there's one more step. Then start introducing new bass notes. Maybe before you worry about the middle notes, just go like this. Right, and then I have a little duet of a bass line. Right, and the melody. Then I can fill it in with color and accents and dynamics and all that stuff to maybe come up with something like this. And, whatever I find out where all that stuff is, then I can be spontaneous and play it differently every time if I want to. Okay?
Okay, man. This is, for people that don't know, this is probably the 5th or 6th, chance I've got to do wait. This is the 5th or 6th time we've done something like this online for various formats. On top of a week we spent together in England doing the guitar retreat, and I learned something new every time, and it's always an absolute joy just to hear you play and to hear you talk about it. But the thing that I always have something to go and work on. I always have a takeaway. I always have, as someone who teaches, I always have new ways of phrasing things to students after these conversations. I always I have so much value from every one of our interactions. So I just need to say thank you so much. Thank you for doing this. And I work with a lot of people. Thank you for being so open about all the things you have to share, and being so forthcoming with your knowledge. From what I can see in the chat, everyone else feels the same way. We all really appreciate you giving up your time and giving up, and the stuff you do on YouTube for free. All of these things that you give us on behalf of the guitar community, not just me for a second. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, everybody. I have this theory. They say you can't take it with you. This idea that if you get a bunch of stuff, when you die, well, there is one thing that you can take with you, and it's your knowledge. So if you don't give it away, you've taken it with you and it's off the table. So I believe in sharing it. I want everybody to feel like they should share it and help this sort of it's the big version of knowing the kid down the street he knew how to play D7 and I didn't. So I went over and I showed him how to play E7. He showed me D7 and we both win, So that's our community. So thank you very much for being a part of it. And hopefully we can keep it strong and healthy and kind and helpful.
Even that was beautiful. Thank you so much. Guys, everyone who's tuned in, we've had a ton of people. I mean, the YouTube stream's been around 220 the whole time. So with Churn, I mean, this is an amazing amount of people. Thank you all, everyone who was we didn't get a chance to say thank you to. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in. If you're watching this on a replay, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's bought the book. I just checked on Amazon and it's shot up the charts again. So,
Oh, jeez.
guys, as I said at the start, I couldn't do this without Tim and without you. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Anything else to look out for? Anything coming up, Tim, that we want to tell people about?
I want to say, definitely going to have questions about this. This guitar right here
Yes.
is made by Timothy Bram, Handmade Guitars. I've had it for just a little while now, but it's the culmination of about 10 years worth of work. Him and I working together. It's a beautiful guitar, and it gets me in the sort of the telly zone, but also in the archtop zone, and I love it. And so if anybody were interested in Tim Bram, you can find out about him online. So just a little plug for Tim, because he's such a sweet guy and he does such good things. Yeah, all my YouTube stuff is available. There's a la carte things on my website, timlerch.com. There is the books on Amazon with Luke, and then there's the TrueFire material. I think I'm pretty well exposed, so you can find out about what I'm doing just by typing into the Google machine.
One other thing, guys, if you want to stay up to date with the events that I do at Guitar Vivo, we are very fortunate enough to do a lot of these streams. We've done some with Bruce Foreman. Head to guitarvivo.com/Tim, and you'll see the sign up page for this event. If you just sign up, put your email in, you'll be messaged when like the next thing with Tim comes out or the next event we have. So if you go to guitarvivo.com/Tim and sign up, you'll stay up to date with all of our cool events and book launches, and it'll help me put out insanely cool things like melodic jazz guitar chord phrases and the melodic jazz guitar chord dictionary. I can breathe one final time. Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We will see you next time.
Leave a review. Send me a picture of it when have the book. Do all that.
If you play something from the book, send us videos, tag us in videos,
yeah.
leave reviews on Amazon, and send photos. We love, what I love is seeing that first photo in the wild. That first time you see someone post a picture of it on their guitar or with their cat, that always warms my heart. So do that.
See you later, everybody. Next time around.